Hello, my dear friends. My name is Margaret, and I'm 78 years old. Today I'm going to share with you one of the most painful stories of my life, but one that taught me the true meaning of a woman's strength. Before I begin, please hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from because your messages always warm my heart. This story takes place in 1973. I was 25 years old and pregnant with my second child. We lived in a small town in Ohio where everyone knew everyone and families helped each other. Or at least that's what I believed at the time. Back then, things were very different, my sweethearts. I married Robert when I was just 19 years old in 1967. He worked at the local textile factory and earned good money for those days, about $180 a week, which was enough to support a family with dignity. Our house was simple but cozy, a two-bedroom home with a front porch where I grew my geraniums and a backyard where we raised some chickens. Robert had built a white picket fence with his own hands that separated our yard from the neighbors. Our neighbor was Linda, a woman about my age who had moved to town just 2 years before. She was divorced, which was quite scandalous in those days, and lived alone in the house right next to ours. She was what you might call a modern woman, always wearing those short skirts and bright makeup. I felt sorry for her being alone, so I often invited her over for coffee and shared vegetables from our garden. If you're enjoying this story so far, please take a moment to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest stories. I already had my first son, little Tommy, who was 3 years old at the time. Robert seemed like the perfect husband and father. He came home every evening at exactly 6 o'clock, we'd have dinner together as a family, and he'd help Tommy with his wooden blocks while I washed the dishes. On Sundays, we'd go to church together, and afterwards visit his mother for Sunday dinner. Everything seemed so perfect, so normal. When I found out I was pregnant again in early 1973, Robert seemed overjoyed. He immediately started talking about converting the small storage room into a nursery and picked up extra shifts at the factory to save money for the baby. I was about 4 months pregnant when the first strange thing happened. It was a Tuesday afternoon in May, and I was hanging laundry on the line in our backyard. The spring air was warm, and I could smell the honeysuckle blooming on the fence. I was struggling a bit with the heavy wet sheets because of my growing belly when I noticed Robert's truck parked in Linda's driveway. It was only 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and he wasn't supposed to be home from work until 6. I thought maybe he had gotten sick and come home early, so I walked around to the front of our house to check if he was there. But the house was empty. His lunch pail was still on the kitchen counter where I had packed it that morning. I looked back at Linda's house and saw the curtains were all drawn shut, which was unusual because Linda always kept them open during the day. I stood there for a moment feeling confused. Maybe he was helping her fix something. Robert was always good with his hands and had helped several neighbors with repairs before. But something in my stomach felt wrong, and it wasn't just the baby moving. About an hour later, I saw Robert's truck pull into our driveway. He came through the front door whistling, which he always did when he was in a good mood. I asked him why he was home early, and he said the factory had sent some workers home because a machine had broken down. It seemed like a reasonable explanation, so I didn't think much more about it. Please take a moment to like this video if you can relate to those moments when something feels off but you can't quite put your finger on it. But over the next few weeks, more strange things started happening. Robert began taking longer showers when he came home from work. He had always been clean, but now he seemed almost obsessive about washing. He also started doing things he had never done before, like offering to go grocery shopping alone or volunteering to take Tommy to the park, so I could rest. At first, I thought he was just being extra considerate because of my pregnancy. Many husbands become more attentive when their wives are expecting. But there was something different about the way he looked at me too. He seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else even when we were talking. One evening in June, we were sitting on the front porch after dinner. Tommy was playing with his toy cars on the steps, and I was mending one of Robert's work shirts. Linda came out of her house wearing a bright yellow sundress and waved at us. Robert waved back, but I noticed he watched her walk to her mailbox longer than necessary. When she bent over to pick up a letter she had dropped, I saw Robert shift uncomfortably in his chair. That night, as we were getting ready for bed, I asked Robert if he thought Linda was pretty. He got defensive immediately, asking why I would ask such a question. He said I was being silly and hormonal because of the pregnancy. His reaction bothered me more than if he had just said yes or no. The next day, I decided to pay more attention. I started keeping track of when Robert came home, and when I saw his truck in the neighborhood during the day. What I discovered made my blood run cold. At least 3 times a week, Robert's truck was parked in Linda's driveway during the afternoon hours when he should have been at work. I called the factory one day, pretending I needed to leave an urgent message for my husband. The secretary told me that Robert was right there working his shift. But I was looking out my kitchen window at that very moment, and his truck was sitting in Linda's driveway. My heart started pounding so hard I thought it might wake the baby inside me. How could his truck be in 2 places at once? Then I realized what was happening. He wasn't driving his truck to Linda's house. He was walking over there, probably going through the backyard so no one would see him. If this story is hitting close to home for you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Sometimes we need to know we're not alone in these experiences. I spent the next few days feeling sick to my stomach, and not just from morning sickness. I kept trying to convince myself that there was an innocent explanation. Maybe Linda was having some kind of emergency and needed help regularly. Maybe Robert was helping her with repairs that required multiple visits. But deep down, I knew what was really happening. One afternoon in late June, when I was about 6 months pregnant, I decided I had to know the truth. Robert had left for work that morning like always, kissing me goodbye and patting my belly to say hello to the baby. Tommy was taking his afternoon nap, so I walked over to Linda's house and knocked on the front door. Linda answered wearing a silk robe in the middle of the afternoon. Her hair was messy, and she had that flushed look of someone who had just been disturbed from something intimate. Behind her, I could see men's clothes draped over a chair, clothes that looked exactly like what Robert had been wearing to work lately. Linda looked surprised and nervous to see me. She kept the door only partially open and didn't invite me in, which was unusual because she had always been friendly before. I asked if everything was okay, and if she needed any help with anything. She said everything was fine, and that she was just taking a nap. As I was walking back to my house, I saw movement in Linda's bedroom window. The curtain moved just slightly, and for a split second, I saw a man's silhouette. The build and height looked exactly like Robert. That evening, Robert came home at his usual time, but he seemed more nervous than usual. He kept asking if I had done anything interesting that day, and if I had talked to any of the neighbors. His questions felt like he was trying to find out if I knew something. I didn't confront him that night, because I needed to be absolutely certain. I also needed time to figure out what I would do if my worst fears were confirmed. I was 6 months pregnant with a 3-year-old son and had no job skills or money of my own. In 1973, options for women in my situation were very limited. The next day, I asked my mother if she could watch Tommy for a few hours. I told her I had a doctor's appointment, which wasn't entirely a lie because I had been thinking about talking to someone about the stress I was feeling. Instead, I positioned myself in our upstairs bedroom window where I had a clear view of both Linda's front and back doors. At exactly 2:15 in the afternoon, I saw Robert walk through our backyard, climb over the fence that he had built with his own hands, and go directly to Linda's back door. She was waiting for him and immediately pulled him inside. I sat in that window for 2 hours, watching my husband's betrayal unfold in the house next door. At 4:30, Robert emerged from Linda's back door, climbed back over our fence, and went to our garage where he kept some tools. 10 minutes later, he left in his truck, presumably to return to work, so he could come home at his normal time and pretend nothing had happened. The pain I felt in that moment wasn't just emotional. I felt physical pain in my chest and stomach that was so intense I was worried it might hurt the baby. I had never experienced betrayal like this before. This wasn't just my husband cheating on me. This was my husband cheating on me with our neighbor, someone I had been kind to, someone I had trusted, someone who smiled at me every day knowing what she was doing behind my back. Please subscribe if you haven't already, because sharing these stories helps other women know they're not alone in facing these terrible betrayals. That night, I couldn't eat dinner. Robert noticed and asked if I was feeling okay. I told him I had been having some pregnancy discomfort, which was true, though not in the way he thought. He suggested I call the doctor, and his concern seemed genuine, which made everything even more confusing and painful. For the next week, I watched the same pattern repeat itself. Robert would leave for work, sneak over to Linda's house in the afternoon, spend 2 hours there, then come home acting like the devoted husband and father. Meanwhile, Linda continued to wave at me cheerfully whenever she saw me, even asking how I was feeling, and if there was anything she could do to help during my pregnancy. The hypocrisy and deception were almost more painful than the cheating itself. These were people I trusted, people I cared about, people who were supposed to care about me and my unborn child. I knew I had to confront them, but I wanted to do it in a way that would give me the upper hand. I was a pregnant woman with limited options, so I needed to be smart about how I handled this situation. I decided to wait until a day when I knew they would be together, and then I would catch them in the act. Not just for my own peace of mind, but because I knew that in a small town like ours, reputation mattered. If I was going to survive this betrayal and rebuild my life, I needed the community to know the truth about what had happened. On a Thursday afternoon in July, when I was 7 months pregnant, I saw Robert make his usual afternoon visit to Linda's house. This time, instead of watching from my window, I walked right up to Linda's front door and knocked loudly. I heard scrambling and whispered voices inside. After about 2 minutes, Linda came to the door wearing the same silk robe as before, but this time she was clearly flustered. I told her I needed to use her telephone because ours wasn't working and I needed to call the doctor about some pregnancy complications. She tried to tell me that her phone was also broken, but I could see the phone sitting on her kitchen table behind her. I said I was having severe pains and was worried about the baby, and I pushed past her into the house. There, sitting at Linda's kitchen table wearing nothing but his underwear and one of her robes, was my husband Robert. The look on his face was one of pure terror and shame. The three of us stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity. Finally, Robert started stammering about how it wasn't what it looked like, and how he could explain everything. But I didn't want to hear his explanations. I had seen everything I needed to see. I looked at Linda and told her that she had been eating dinner at my table and playing with my child while carrying on this affair with my husband. I told her that I had treated her like family and that she had repaid my kindness by sleeping with my husband while I was pregnant with his child. Then I looked at Robert and told him that he had exactly 1 hour to get his belongings out of our house before I called his mother, his boss, and everyone else in town to tell them what kind of man he really was. The power in that moment came from my voice staying calm and steady, even though inside I was falling apart. I didn't scream or cry or beg. I simply stated the facts and the consequences. If you're going through something similar, please know that your strength is greater than you realize. Hit that like button if this story is giving you courage. Robert started crying and begging me to let him explain, to give him another chance to think about our family. But I was done thinking about our family. He had stopped thinking about our family the moment he climbed over that fence into Linda's backyard. I walked home, called my mother, and told her I needed her to come over immediately. When she arrived, I told her everything that had happened. My mother, bless her heart, didn't ask a lot of questions or try to convince me to work things out. She just held me while I cried, and then helped me figure out what to do next. Robert did come home within the hour, and he did pack his clothes. He tried several more times to apologize and beg for forgiveness, but I had made up my mind. I told him he could see Tommy on weekends if he wanted, but that he was no longer welcome in our home. Linda moved away from town about a month later. I heard through the grapevine that Robert had moved in with her temporarily, but their relationship didn't last long. Apparently, when you build a relationship on betrayal and deception, it doesn't have a very solid foundation. I gave birth to my daughter Sarah in October of 1973. Robert was not there for her birth by my choice. My mother and sister were with me instead, and I felt more supported and loved than I had in months. The next few years were difficult financially, but I managed. I got a job at the local bank, started with just filing and answering phones, but worked my way up to becoming a loan officer. The woman who trained me told me that I had a natural talent for understanding people and their financial situations, probably because I had learned firsthand how quickly a secure situation could fall apart. I never remarried, though I had opportunities. I decided that I would rather be alone and strong than with someone I couldn't trust. Tommy and Sarah grew up knowing that their mother was someone who stood up for herself and didn't accept being treated badly. Robert tried to come back several times over the years, especially when he was having problems with other relationships. But I had learned that some betrayals can't be forgiven, not because you're not capable of forgiveness, but because the person who betrayed you hasn't really changed. Now, at 78 years old, I can tell you that leaving Robert was one of the best decisions I ever made. It was also one of the hardest, but it taught me that I was stronger than I ever imagined and that I could survive anything life threw at me. My children grew up to be wonderful adults who respect themselves and others. Tommy became a teacher, and Sarah became a nurse. They both married good people who treat them well, and I think seeing me refuse to accept poor treatment showed them what they should expect from their own relationships. The lesson I want to share with all of you watching today is this. When someone shows you who they really are, believe them. Don't make excuses for them, don't try to fix them, and don't sacrifice your own dignity hoping they'll change. You are stronger than you know, braver than you feel, and more valuable than anyone who would betray your trust deserves. If you're going through something similar right now, please know that you can survive this, and that there is a better life waiting for you on the other side of this pain. Thank you for listening to my story today. Please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share your own thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Your stories help other women feel less alone in their struggles. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember that you deserve to be treated with love and respect.